Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Art of Marriage, our 6-week journey on how to add meaning to your love. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping rules, just about, just a couple things we got to get out of the way before we get started with the course. Number one is, obviously, most of you are aware of this already, but in case somebody's watching the recording, we will be meeting every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. For those of you that find the time a little bit inconvenient, it's a 90-minute class that goes till 10 p.m. And I will do my best to end on time. For those that find the time a little inconvenient, I just want to explain it. I think some of you are aware, but this class, obviously, a big part of the target audience has children and are young and cannot really get onto any. I know if I was attending this class and Gitty wasn't doing bedtime alone, then it would be difficult for me to attend anything other than 8:30. And like tonight, for example, it was very easy for me to get out because both girls were sleeping before I left, and Menachem was kind of already down, and so the house kind of settles right around 8 o'clock. So that was the idea of the timing. So we'll meet every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. The login information that you use today is the login information that we'll be using every week. And if you miss a lesson, so obviously, if you're here, that means you got my email. You'll also receive a follow-up email from me after today's class tomorrow. And if you miss a class, there will be a link to the recording of today's class in that email. In case you miss a class, you can always catch up with that. So that's the system for that. In terms of textbooks, so for tonight, I still had people registering today and yesterday, etc. Somebody even registered even as they arrived today to the class. They registered and then just showed up, which is fine. As a result, I don't have all the textbooks for everyone, but the good news is we have the PDF for lesson 1. So you should have that, and if you have that, you can open it up or print it out and have it nearby, because it would be nice to include everybody in some of the exercises or texts that we read, etc. Hold on, I'm just answering some people that are trying to get on. Hold on. Let me send them the login info. Okay. Hopefully that should help for those people. Oh, perfect. Okay, looks like it went to some people's spam. Okay, I was just a little nervous that people. Okay, so in terms of the textbooks, they will be available as of Sunday. So anybody, for those who live a little further, like the Shebis, for example, I actually sent the book to your home directly. And by the way, if anybody wants a second book, like if spouses sometimes will not be in the same place or traveling or whatever, you need a second textbook, just let me know. I'd be happy to send you a second textbook, but I always assume that if you're a couple, or then you're going to be sharing the textbook. The textbook, it can either be shipped to your home, or you can have it picked up on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, for that matter. If you're here over Purim, or if you're here, just make a point of coming over to me. They'll be in my office. You can get your textbooks. That's in terms of that. In terms of the structure of the class, I know there are some of you here that have been to other courses of mine, others that haven't. The way that I like to structure the classes is that as we go through the lesson, it's kind of structured as like a lecture that I'm talking, and there are slides that kind of assist with that, but I like to get interaction from the crowd. So whenever we have a text that we're reading that kind of backs up what we're saying, I like to have people read it. And if they are available to read it, then great. If you're uncomfortable reading, just send me a text message or a chat message, or even just tell me and wave me along, and I'll be happy to pick on the next guy. The same thing goes for the exercises. There are exercises. We try not to have people share when the exercises are more personal in nature, but if they are more general and it's just to stimulate the conversation, we always appreciate when people chime in and get involved, etc. That's always a good thing. In terms of the subject material, so of course the subject is going to be marriage, and when the subject material is marriage, it's a little bit more sensitive. So I want to talk about a few things that should be said as like an introduction to the whole course. Number one is that first of all, this course is not built as a self-help for marriage. It's not built as like, oh my gosh, my marriage is in crisis. Therefore, I need to go to a marriage class. Rabbi Zushi's email arrived in my inbox just in time. This is going to solve the crisis. In other words, if I hope nobody on this Zoom is in that situation, but just in case, let me say it. In case if someone is in such a situation, they should still be pursuing professional help. You should pursue a therapist. If you'd like, I'm happy to connect you with someone. You can even come and talk to a rabbi, but the conversation when a marriage is in crisis is obviously very different than when a marriage is just, could use an extra oomph in terms of adding meaning to it. This course was marketed as, and I just want to emphasize it again at the beginning, as adding meaning to your love. In other words, Judaism views marriage as an ideal, as a mitzvah. Many people think of it in terms of, Judaism wants us to get married because they want us to have children, they want us to procreate. No, it turns out Judaism has a mitzvah, even if for some reason, let's say two people that are older, right, and that have never been married and cannot have children, they would still be obligated to get married. So this course is meant to introduce you to that ideal. Now, along the way, obviously, there will be many tips and many insights that will help a marriage, whether it's in crisis or whether it's, as I hope most of you are, floating along beautifully with just needing some extra oomph in it. However, I just want to make that disclaimer that if you or someone that you're sharing this with is in need that way, please reach out to me or reach out to a therapist. Either way is fine, and I'll be happy to connect you with someone. Okay. Another random technical thing that I just want to say at the outset, and then we're going to dive right into it, is actually a few more technical things. First of all, I love when videos are on. I know people are uncomfortable with it. I know that sometimes maybe you're eating, you're in bed. That's fine. If you don't want to, that's fine. I'm not going to force you to. But you should know that to me as the teacher, when I see people and I can see the reactions of people as I'm talking, it really does add a lot. So if you're available to, that's always best, obviously. Another technical thing is in terms of questions and referrals. So questions, if you have them during the class, please keep a pen handy and write them down. Especially if they're of a personal nature, I ask that you keep them for after the class. It's okay to ask questions during the class, ideally during windows that I'll designate for that, because there's a lot of material that we want to cover and we don't want. And I ask you to respect it. If I do ask you to keep the question to after the class, let's say you want to ask a question, but I see on the timing that we're running late, I'm trying to be very cognizant of the fact that it's already 8:30 at night and we're getting close to 10 o'clock, and we're scheduled to end at 10 o'clock. I don't want to end at 10:05 or 10:10 because the class takes too long. So if I see we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, then I'll take questions. If not, I try to keep them for after the class. When everybody's welcome to hang around after 10 o'clock, I'm not rushing out, but I want to be able to let people who do need to go. The last technical point is about referrals. I often make references and referrals and recommendations to books, to articles, to videos that I've seen or that I've heard that are either backing up or augmenting the point that I'm making. I will do my best in the after lesson emails, just like I'm sending you the video recording, to also send out links to those things as well. Okay? So without further ado, let's dive into our course, shall we? So welcome to the Art of Marriage, How to Add Meaning to Your Love. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, we are going to be taking quite a journey together, and I wanted to kind of give you an overview of the course before we dive into the actual lesson for today. So lesson 1 today, the goal is going to be to talk about the case for marriage. Why get married? Now, I know for many of you on this Zoom, it's already too late, so you're like, why are we discussing this? The reason it's important is because the best way to make sure that you're being married properly is to, even if you're fixing it, even if you're adding details to it, even if you've never really thought about why you got married, it's still important to have the answer to that question in your head from one perspective or another. And obviously in today's class, we'll be talking about the Torah perspective. And we're going to talk about how important it is to get married, because that will aid and assist us throughout the entire course. Understanding the Torah's value of marriage will aid us in troubleshooting whatever it is. So lesson 2 is going to immediately get right into it. You're going to learn some bedroom secrets. A Jewish view on intimacy, on physical intimacy. We're going to talk about the way that Judaism views the bedroom. And yes, along the way, we will talk about the laws of mikvah and taharat mishpacha, but primarily we're going to talk about why it is that Judaism doesn't view it as a dirty word. In other words, it's actually considered the holiest act that a man and woman can do, or really that a human being can do, is to engage in physical intimacy. And we'll talk about why that is and how that works and how that jives with the rest of Judaism, etc. In lesson 3, we're going to start to talk about what about when, now that we've introduced the perfect ideal, right? Ideally, this is what a marriage looks like. What about when it's not so perfect, right? What about when I'm dealing with being married to someone and that person, what about when? It's a fact that we are all married to people with character flaws. I don't mean to put down your spouse, but everybody has character flaws. So how does that work? What can we do about not dealing with, but being married to someone who has character flaws? And then in lesson 4, we'll talk about the other side, which is what about our own character flaws? We need to, a marriage is made up of two people, and we want to talk about how to be properly married to someone when we are aware that they have character flaws, and how to be married with our own character flaws. In other words, not by becoming comfortable with them. We obviously need to always be growing and becoming better people, but how to navigate marriage in that context. In lesson 5, we're going to talk about a very difficult topic, which is marriage infidelity. We're going to define the boundaries in a marriage. A marriage is not all about love, and we just become, my life is your life and your life is my life. It actually, there are sacred spaces even within the marriage that need to be respected by the spouses. We'll talk a lot about that. In lesson 6, we'll talk about makeup or breakup, negotiating the most significant challenge of our generation. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about divorce, even though we're really not going to talk that much about divorce in this course. In lesson 6, we'll touch on it, but we're really going to talk about navigating conflict when it comes up in a marriage. And it's going to be mainly about repairing that conflict and working through that conflict and growing through that conflict, etc. So obviously we'll touch on divorce, but really throughout the course, we're not really going to be talking much about divorce. There are things that Judaism has to say about divorce. Divorce is actually a mitzvah, by the way, believe it or not, in the Torah. That obviously not for everyone to get divorced, right? It's a mitzvah that if the situation requires it, and the Torah has very specific guidelines for it, then we should get divorced. But we're not really going to be talking about that too much in this course. All right? So let's dive into lesson 1. The case for marriage, an antiquated relic versus existential need. And I'd like to start off with a little exercise, shall we? So if you have your textbook open or your handout open, we are on page 2, and we see here a statement from Groucho Marx, who essentially says like this: marriage is a wonderful institution, but who wants to live in an institution? Now, it's obviously a tongue-in-cheek comment, but it's also a very serious comment. And my question to you is, do you agree or disagree with this comment? Where 1 would mean you totally disagree, and 10 means you totally agree. Can anybody give me a number from 1 to 10 whether they agree or disagree with this statement? Come on, don't be shy. Somebody.
9.
9. Okay, why do you agree with this statement, Josh?
Because it has to have some boundaries as an institution, or else the fabric of society would basically fall apart.
Okay.
And also for the kids.
Okay.
I mean, obviously there's a romantic element to it, but there also, I think, is an institutional element.
So you're talking about the fact that the institution is a good part of it, that it needs to be an institution of some sort. Okay. Susie, I see Susie or Peter, one of you unmuted. You want to try to go for it?
Susie did, yes.
I was a little confused on what part I would agree with, because marriage is a wonderful institution, but who wants to live in an institution? So which part are we agreeing?
You tell me.
You
tell me how you feel. You take it where you want to take it.
Oh, okay.
1 to 10.
Agreeing, but because the way it's phrased is, who wants to live in an institution? So there's a question,
right? So you don't agree with that question, you're saying?
I guess to me it seems more like the question requires an answer rather than do I agree with it or not.
Okay, and what's your answer?
I want to live in an institution.
You want to live in an institution, and you like the idea. You like the idea of viewing marriage as an institution, and that's what I want to live in. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. No, I don't think I can articulate it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We're putting you on the spot. That's okay. I think another way of taking this question, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong answers here. We're just trying to get a feel for where we are here. Jesse, you want to weigh in here?
I don't know that it's a wonderful institution.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Good. I was looking for the tension. We got it. Go for it.
Yeah, no, it's just there's a lot of especially in today's day and age, I just feel like there's a lot of confusion and failure around, so
marriage, there's everybody right around now is when people like to quote that the divorce rates are through the roof. So yeah, exactly. If it's such a wonderful institution, why are so many people leaving it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. the reason I'm asking is because the statement that we have on the wall is really one of like thousands out there. We've all heard tongue-in-cheek jokes all about how difficult a marriage is, or how, oh, when you get married, that's when you lose your freedom, or that's when you whatever. I don't know. You know, like there's a list of them here in the in the teacher's manual. If you want, I could read some of them to you. Henny Youngman is quoted as saying, "The secret of a happy marriage remains a secret." Mickey Rooney is quoted as saying, "Always get married early in the morning. That way, if it doesn't work out, you haven't wasted a whole day." There's all these sarcastic remarks that we find, and we laugh at them because we do laugh at them, right? Because why are we laughing at them? We laugh at them because we relate to them. Why do we relate to them? I think we relate to them because we all acknowledge, married or unmarried, in other words, whether we're trying to get married and we've been in long-term relationships, or whether we're married or whether we're divorced, we all relate to the fact that marriage is a difficult institution to be in. And that's, I think, the question that he's asking, whether he was asking it tongue-in-cheek and we're turning it serious or not, is so then why would you want to live in an institution? In other words, if marriage is an institution, and he's saying tongue-in-cheek, obviously, institution like a mental institution, so then why would you want to live in it? Let's put it this way. Am I the only one that goes to a wedding? And every wedding I find hauntingly emotional. Like, you go there and you see the bride and the groom and you're so excited, and they're so, usually the only person who isn't moved and isn't emotional is like somebody who just went through a breakup. You know, they're like cynical as God knows what, etc. Right? And the truth is that we're not the only ones that when we look at marriage, we see it as a beautiful thing. Like when we see two people actually getting married, we see it as a beautiful thing. God himself sees it as a beautiful thing. When God wants to use an analogy, a parable, if you will, for his relationship with the Jewish people, he uses marriage. But yet we have to face the fact that sadly, more than a third of those who marry end up in a divorce court. Right? So it starts off as a happily ever after, but then we know the facts. And if you're cynical enough in the moment, then you're thinking about it. And it's like this weird tug and pull. Why do we find it so exciting, emotional? Like, you see the two people, it's not like we don't believe that they're in love with each other. We do believe they're in love with each other. We do believe they're going to spend the rest of their lives together. We do believe that they're going to live happily ever after. But then we also know that if you walk into Vroman's here on Colorado Boulevard, probably the largest section is going to be the self-help section on marriage, right? So what are we doing here? And more importantly, why are millions of people doing it? Right? Which I guess raises the obvious question, which is what I want to talk about next, which is, what is it that people want and need from their marriages? Why do people get married in the first place? So let's do this learning interaction on page 3. The question on the table is, in your estimation, what are the 3 primary reasons that people seek marriage? And you don't have to give your own personal reasons. Choose from the following list or add your own reasons. All right? And I'd love for people to share, for people just to throw out what they feel their top 3 are from here, or you can add your own. That's okay.
FOMO.
Come again?
Do you want us to say it out loud?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. I just missed what you said.
FOMO.
FOMO. Oh, so it's on there. Meeting social expectations.
Yeah, fear of missing out. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Social
Everybody's
expectations,
doing
basically. Like,
it.
everybody else is getting married, right? Which is why, by the way, those are the people that when they're in their 20s, they say, I'm never getting married. And then in their 30s, when all their friends are married, they're like, oh, I want to get married, right?
Yeah, and
Right,
that's where I've seen issues, is when it's for that.
When that's the only reason you get married. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to dive in? What do you think the top reasons are?
Family?
To build a family. So you're saying to have children and build a family. Very good. I love it.
Or
Anybody else?
family pressure? Are you saying family pressure or to have a family?
Yelena, which one were you saying?
Kids. Like
To have
Oh,
children.
okay.
Right. Okay. By the way, it doesn't only have to be to have children. It can also be for I think it's on here somewhere. Being part of number 3, being part of a nuclear family, right? So it's for the children. In other words, giving to others, etc., which is a beautiful thing, and also to be part of a nuclear family, to have that support. That's another reason people get married. Anybody else want to chime in?
I think a lot of it has to do with attachment. I think especially when people don't know each other that well, or maybe in secular society, they just get married after like a short amount of time because they have some sort of attachment to the person, and it's
Right.
yeah.
So when you say attachment, you mean
I meant like
physical
like
intimacy?
no, No,
passion.
not even necessarily physical intimacy, just like maybe their attachment style, like that person meets whatever
They just
their
clicked very well. Okay,
Yeah.
so that would go to like admiration, attachment, right? Those ones there. Okay, got you. All right. I want to start with tax benefits. Okay, the reason I want to start with tax benefits is mainly because nobody said it. The reason I think nobody said it is because, to a large degree, most of us are like, tax benefits. There's other ways to get tax benefits. First of all, I'm not even sure you need to be married in order to have tax benefits, right? Like you can joint file these days without being married. I remember Gitti and I, we got married in the summer, but for some reason it took us time to get a marriage certificate. Look, so just for context, we got married Jewishly with a chuppah and a wedding and all that, etc. in the summer in August, and then we did not get a marriage certificate for a few months. And I don't remember exactly how long it took us, but whenever it was, we got around to it. But it was after the tax year finished. And I remember talking to Gitti about it in December and saying, "Ooh, I wonder if we should really get our marriage certificate together because it'll be a tax benefit." And then I went to my accountant. My accountant was like, "What are you talking about? I'll just put you both on the tax filing. It's really not a big deal to joint file without being married." The reason I want to start with that one is because I wonder if we could apply that to more things. As we start to sweep through this list, and that's the question we're asking on page 4, is carefully consider your 3 choices. Without being married, is it possible to gain the same or similar benefits in the course of a loving, close, monogamous relationship with a member of the opposite gender? So again, let's look at the way they described it. It's not a marriage, but it's a loving, close, monogamous relationship. In America, that's perfectly allowed. It's a free country. You're allowed to do that. So, Yelena, if you wanted to, you could live in a family where you get the nuclear family. You can have children, right? Which is, I think, one of the ones you mentioned. And you don't have to be married. And in today's society, it's not even really frowned upon. In fact, there was a study done in April 2009. The National Center for Health Statistics, it wasn't a study, it was just statistics. They announced that nearly 40% of babies born in the United States in 2007, in other words, in that year, which is 1 year they were observing, were delivered by unwed mothers, which is fascinating. I know we have this like whole stereotype of like born out of wedlock, right? I don't know that all those unwed mothers would match our stereotype. Could be they were in a relationship where they might have been your best friends and you just wouldn't have known that they weren't married. They just never bothered, right? And I wonder how many of these things we can apply to that. Certainly admiration and attachment, which are things that both parties benefit from in a marriage. I don't think you need to be married in order to have that. Financial security, certainly not. Friendship, certainly not. And even having children and love and these sort of things, do you really need to be married in order to have these things? So this I think a lot of these attitudes are what lead a lot of people to think about the fact that maybe these are not the reasons that people are getting married. Maybe there's something deeper that people are really pursuing, and obviously we're starting to head in the direction of Torah and Hasidism, etc., which is going to say that there's actually something deeper that we're looking for that we might not even be in tune with. That's why we're getting married. But before we get there, let's just establish that people actually do want to get married. Is that true, or is marriage really on the road to becoming obsolete? Let's take a look at some actual data and see for ourselves. I'd like to do an exercise with you guys. All right, we're on page 4. I'm going to ask a simple true or false question each time, okay? And you know what? I'll pick on people. Should I pick on people that are quiet, or should we let them be quiet? We'll see. Okay. Josh, we'll start with you. The probability, I want you to answer true or false. The probability that an American will marry by the age of 40 is higher than 80%. Do you think that's true or false?
True.
You think that's true? Okay, let's find out. Marriage by the numbers. Here we go, folks. The answer is true. 86% of women will marry will be married by the time they reach age 40, and 81% of men will be married by the time they reach the age of 40, leading to a median of 83 point whatever it is percent. Let's try the next question. Jesse. Oh, here, Susie, you're unmuted. Perfect. Susie, Peter, one of you. True or false? College graduates are more likely to marry than those with no higher education.
I think that one's true.
Let's find out. True. Very good. College graduates are far more likely to marry than those with no higher education. Let's try number 3. Jesse, you're up now. More than 1/3 of Americans under the age of 30 assert that they don't feel the need to marry. Do you think that's true or false?
I think that's true.
So we're looking at the young people now, right? So we've shifted our conversation. The answer, Jesse, you're going to be surprised, is false. Actually, 95% of young people, people under 30, in their 20s, state a plan to marry,
95?
Americans.
which is pretty impressive. And that's from a Pew Research study, if I remember correctly. Give me a second, I'll give you the exact source for this.
The last one I think is false.
Yeah, from a Pew Research study taken in 2000 and I can't remember the exact year. I thought I had the year here. I don't have the year. But this is all statistics that if you ask me afterwards, I'll find the exact link for you and I'll send it over to you to back it up. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because I think, to summarize, what these numbers are telling us is a very interesting thing. Number one, the State of the Union, right? We said the State of the Union of the U.S., right? The State of the Union of marriage is actually quite sound. For some reason, people seem to be under the impression that it's heading towards becoming obsolete. People seem to to think dismally about the numbers, but when you ask them individually, are you planning to get married? Then overwhelmingly, people still seem to believe in it. Okay? And the question, what I want to know is why. Okay? Now, I think that some of us, our knee-jerk reaction is going to be, oh, that's probably movies that are to blame, or TV shows, or whatever, or like or romantic novels, whatever it is. I don't know that that's fair to say for two reasons. First of all, I believe more in the American people. I believe that they are a little bit smarter than just, oh, a movie says that it's a wonderful thing. Okay, and I understand that might be a little bit naive, and some people might say it's more critical. So my second point, I think, is even stronger. My second point is, if it's just movies and romantic novels that are driving us to get married, then what explains the movies and the romantic novels? In other words, why are we writing these stories for ourselves? Why are we going to watch these movies? I understand that once somebody's at the movie, you could be cynical and say, that's it. They watched a movie about Princess Cinderella or this one or that one or whatever, right? And they're like, I want to get married. First of all, by the way, the movies are less so today, for what it's worth. They were that way 20, 30 years ago, and today they're trying to be more real and more in tune with the reality, etc. And yet the numbers stay the same, that people still seem to want to get married. But even though there still is an overwhelming amount of these big romantic movies and books and whatever, why are they bestsellers? In other words, what came first, the chicken or the egg? There's thousands of them being sold. There's thousands of people reading them, hundreds, thousands, whatever. There's obviously an underlying drive that human beings have to get married. Now, we're slowly eliminating a lot of the reasons for that, right? We tried to say, oh, it's only because of... We didn't do the fourth one. Okay, we'll do the fourth one in a second. We tried to say that it's only because of love or children but it turns out a lot of those things you can get outside of a marriage, and today it's becoming more and more socially acceptable to have all those things outside of a marriage. And yet people, for some reason, want to get married, right? Why is that? That's what I want to know. Let's do the fourth one just for fun. Yelena, if you can answer for us. What do you think? More than 2/3 of romantic partners who live together claim to be happy and have no intention of marrying. What do you think? True or false?
True.
No, false. When people live together and they're not married, if you ask them, we're under the impression that they're like, oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, keep going. But the truth is that, again, we seem to consistently see this urge, this tick that was created in human beings, that they want to get married. And the question is, where is that from? Let's start with some text, shall we? Josh, if you can read for us text 1, it's on page 4.
I don't have the...
you don't have it. Okay.
No.
It's in the email. If you have the email, it might have gone to your junk. Take a look, and you can open up the text to follow along with us if you'd like to do that. For now, Jesse will ask you, text 1, please, on page 4.
Yeah. Neither man nor woman need to be married to have sex or companionship or professional success or respect or even children. Yet marriage remains revered and desired.
Okay, so this pretty much sums up everything we've said until now, which is all the studies seem to point to everybody seems to want to get married. And the question is why? Just closing the door to my office. Hold on. My question is why? Where does this come from? Okay, so from a Jewish perspective, this goes all the way back to the creation of man and woman. Text 2 starts us off. Susie, if you can read for us, please. It's the verse, of course, from Genesis, which actually is God observing that he wants the human being to get married.
Yeah.
Text 2, page 5.
Text 2, okay. God said, it is not good that man is alone, and shall make for him a helpmate alongside him.
Ooh, so right here, at the beginning, When God says that I'm going to create a woman for the man, he says why he's doing so. He's creating, so to speak, the institution of marriage. He's even creating the potential for the institution of marriage, right? And he says why he's doing so. Why? Because it's not a good idea to be alone. And modern psychology actually sheds light on why it's not good for a man or woman to be alone. Like, right, we can always ask why. Why is it not good to be alone? Josh, you ready to read?
I still don't have it,
Still don't have
actually.
it. Okay, no worries.
And I actually don't have my internet on.
That's okay. So leave it alone. Leave it alone. We'll skip you for reading. So Yelena, if you can read for us, please. Text 3 on page 5. Go for it.
Okay. So we live best in the shelter offered by another's love. An attachment bond is persistent. Once made, it is specific to another irreplaceable person. Once we are bonded, we seek our closeness with our loved one, and we are deeply distressed at emotional or physical separation. We seek comfort and sense of security with this person. We're emotionally invested in these relationships, and they penetrate key aspects of our lives. These bonds have incredible survival value. We are healthier, happier, psychologically stronger, and we live longer when we are close and connected. This is why, even though we might get distracted into one-night sexual adventure, we still fight to connect and to hold on to our loved relationship. Our most natural
And longed for state. Is it?
and launched for state is a strong, nurturing, monogamous pair bond.
Thank you, Yelena. Dr. Sue Johnson, for what it's worth, is one of the leaders, is one of the leading experts in the field. I think her bestseller is called Hold Me Tight, which is why this article is from her website, holdmetight.com. And she's making the case that the reason that it's not a healthy thing for a human being to be alone. When we are not alone, it has tremendous benefits on our mental health. We end up with emotional support, which leads to a feeling of security, a sense of connection, independence, validation, self-understanding, and a higher sense of self-worth. These are all things that we crave outside of relationships, or many of them we crave outside of relationships, and yet when we're not alone, when we don't feel alone, then the research shows that all of these things are enhanced. So let's take a look at the video that we have about the Torah perspective on this, so we can really appreciate this. Please turn your attention to the video screens. Oh, hold on a second. Where did it go? Did I skip it? What happened here? Okay, maybe not. Give me a second. Might not be a video tonight. Okay. I thought I had the video there. We'll move on without the video then. Sorry about that. Maybe if I can, in the recording, I'll stick the video in. Okay. So what I'd like to talk about, and I guess I'll summarize the video briefly, is that when God created the world, God created the in the beginning dark and light, and the sun and the moon and the stars, etc. And as you go through the narrative of creation in the Torah, you will find over and over again this description of creation as being good, right? It says, and God said, let there be light. Then it says, and God saw the light, and the light was good. And God said, let there be, vegetation spread forth. And God saw that, and it was good. It was good. Everything was good. Some things were very good, right? Some things twice in one day he said are good. And then all of a sudden we get this statement, which was text 2, Lo tov hayot ha'adam levado. It's the first time we get the statement lo tov. It's not good. There's something that is not good. What is not good, says God? Loneliness is not good. For a human being to be alone, that's not good. And remember, he had created human being alone. And there's lots of commentary, we're not going to get into it now, about why he created human being alone and then created a spouse for them to marry, etc. But he created human being, he ultimately realizes that was not good, and it's important for a human being to be alone. And ever since that moment, marriage was a reality in the world. And then, with the giving of the Torah, marriage becomes a mitzvah. Jesse, if you can read for us again, please. Text 4a.
Yeah. When the Torah was given, God instructed the Jews that if a man wishes to marry a woman, he must first acquire her hand in marriage, in the presence of witnesses, and afterwards she can be his wife, from Maimonides' Mishneh Torah.
Okay, so this is an introduction to the first stage of marriage, which was given at Sinai, or at least the way it was structured at Sinai, which is called kiddushin. In biblical parlance, it's actually called erusin, but we're going to go with the term kiddushin. Kiddushin is commonly translated as betrothal, as in they got engaged or something like that, but it actually renders the bride and groom as husband and wife, as married already, in the eyes of Torah law. Kiddushin can be implemented in several ways, including the groom's acquiring his bride's hand by giving her something of monetary value. Today, obviously, that's commonly done with a wedding band, but really, according to biblical and Talmudic law, that can be done with anything that's worth a significant amount of money. Obviously, it has to be done with the intention of marriage, right? This doesn't make every gift, even though there are people who are careful not to give gifts to the other gender, but it doesn't have any halachic issue. Because it has to be done with the intention of marriage, and it has to be done with in front of two witnesses, where he says, as we do under the chuppah, for example, "Harei at mekudeshet li," right? That I'm giving this to you with the intention of betrothal. And there's other ways to do it as well. But this kiddushin renders the bride and groom a married couple to the point that, according to Jewish law, if they wish to get divorced at that point, they actually would need a get. They would need a ritual divorce. But there's one minor caveat. Susie, can you read for us, please? Or I guess Susie read last step. So Peter, why don't you read text 4b, page 7?
A betrothed couple may not be sexually intimate until the groom secludes himself with the bride in his home and designates her as his wife. This is called
Nisu'in. So it turns out a Jewish marriage has 2 steps. And while it sounds very similar to being engaged and then being married, it's actually not. I mean, I've never heard of somebody who has been engaged to be married and then needed a divorce from that person, right? No, that's the whole point of marriage. Only once you get married do you seal the deal. No, Judaism says we're sealing the deal. You're married. You're giving the wedding band. Now you're married, right? Kiddushin has happened. The first step of marriage has happened. And by the way, traditionally in ancient times, there would have been a year in between these two. Okay? So they would finish Kiddushin and they would be married for everything else besides for being physically intimate. After the betrothal, they would not be physically intimate. After that, they would then continue on to the second stage. At some point, let's say after a year, which is called Nisuin, then they would seclude themselves alone in a room. They don't have to actually be intimate with each other. That's fine. They can do that whenever they're ready. And at that point, they become married. This, by the way, becomes the origin of the chuppah. The chuppah is kind of symbolic of going into a room together, and everybody's watching them go into a room together. Obviously, for those of you that have been to a religious wedding, you know that after the chuppah, they then actually go into a room, which ideally has no windows and no doors, or if they do, they're covered, and only one entrance. It doesn't have another entrance, and they go in there and they close the door. They're in there for a significant amount of time. I believe that halachically the amount of time has to be that in theory, they could be physically intimate during that time, and witnesses are watching. In other words, not inside the room; they're watching from outside that they have been alone inside that room, and then that is what makes them married. Now, my question is, what's going on here? What are these 2 stages here? Why would the Torah mandate a period? Now, by the way, today we do kiddushin and nisuin under the chuppah at the same time. In other words, we make sure to make them as 2 separate things. If you're ever at a wedding, you'll hear them say, "Now kiddushin is being done." You'll see the groom give a ring to the bride and or whatever else, right? Whatever else, give her the ketubah, etc. And then usually at a wedding, they do something called the reading of the ketubah. I want to bust a myth here. You don't need to read the ketubah at the wedding. It's not important to read the ketubah. It's not an actual part of the wedding. The reason it's done is actually to serve as the separation between the kiddushin and the nisuin. So because we're going to be doing both on the day of the wedding, you read the ketubah and that separates the 2. Why? Because even today, when we don't anymore have a year in between kiddushin and nisuin, and we could talk about some of the technical reasons why that is, mainly because Judaism went through a big period where financially it was very difficult for people to throw 2 parties, one for kiddushin, one for nisuin. So therefore, it was communities that enacted that they should both be done together. But I want to talk about why this ideal exists, why the Torah would mandate that marriage should be done in 2 stages. It's almost like we're dividing marriage into 2. And the 2 are almost identical, except that there's a period after the first one. Physical intimacy is not prohibited during marriage, obviously not, right? But during this period of kiddushin, you're prohibited from being physically intimate. You can't. By the way, this means that during that period, they're not physically intimate with their spouse, and they're not physically intimate with anybody else. Now, obviously, according to proper Jewish law, you shouldn't be physically intimate with anybody even before Kiddushin, even before the first one. But after the first one, it goes to a new category. It's considered infidelity. It's considered adultery. In other words, it's considered being married to someone and sleeping with someone else, even though, when you think about it, they haven't been with their own wife. So why is this considered infidelity? Whatever, I guess it breaks the betrothal, right? But that's only if you look at it as an engagement. What's going on here is they're already married, but there has to be a period where they're married, there's no physical intimacy, and then the marriage gets finished, and then they move on to physical intimacy, being also a part of that relationship. Why do you think that is? Anybody want to try to guess here? I guess what I'm asking is, if it doesn't walk like a duck, quack like a duck, or look like a duck, is it still a duck? Right? If it doesn't look like a marriage, walk like a marriage, quack like a marriage, then what makes it a marriage?
So are you saying you have to consecrate the marriage? Is that, or you're asking why is there a gap between the ketubah and nisuin?
Exactly. What is the purpose of kiddushin? What is the
If
purpose?
there's a 9-month gap, then you know the offspring is you think it is.
Very good. Okay, so he's saying because we want a safety window, right? Like before. Okay, very good. I hear. Anybody else? Okay. This is the topic that I want to talk about. Okay, I think this is going to be the biggest takeaway from today's lesson. So we've really arrived at where I wanted to get to. Number one was and by the way, this is why we started off with that exercise of if marriage is an institution. Because what we are going to learn is that from a Torah perspective, marriage is an institution. Not only like Josh shared, because there are boundaries to it and there's a definition to it, and like Susie shared that it's a space that you come into and it's a definition that you go into, etc. Not only because of that, but there's actually something about kiddushin. There's something about being married that is an institution that you go into and that's separated from all the other aspects of marriage, such as physical intimacy, for example. There is something else to it, and we want to know what that is.
Well, isn't kiddushin, isn't kadosh part of it? There's a
Yes,
holy
absolutely.
part of it, so it's more than just obviously physical intimacy.
You are 100% on the right path. The word kiddushin comes from the word kadosh, he's pointing out, which means holy, and we're going to talk exactly about what that means. Absolutely. Before we do that, let me ask an introductory question. Which relationship is deeper, do you think? This is the question on page 8. The relationship between spouses or the parent-child relationship? Anybody want to hazard a guess here?
I think that deeper. That's so interesting.
Anybody?
I would say probably the spouse, since you choose.
That's a good guess if we're in a marriage course. But you want to try to explain that?
Because you're choosing.
Okay.
You choose to be with your wife. I mean, it's like
Why does that make it deeper?
With God, it's like you talk about on Shabbat. It's like you're marrying. It's like this. You're under the chuppah with God in a sense. So it's
Right.
like this. It's this.
You're saying a lot of true points, but
There's
I want to push back here.
will.
I want
There's
to.
it's
You
free
said there's
will
a choice.
that
You're saying because there's a choice, because you could choose not to be married, and you're choosing to be married. That makes it a deeper relationship. I want to push back and say maybe that makes it a more shallow relationship. If the relationship between me and my spouse means that I can choose to have it or choose not to have it, doesn't that make it more shallow than a parent-child relationship? I just want to clarify. We're not comparing this to your relationship with your barber, right? Which is almost like an associateship. It's not even a relationship. Then, of course, they're both deeper. We're comparing this to a parent-child relationship intentionally because a parent-child relationship is something you don't choose. There's something so deep about that. This person is literally, it's a blood relationship. You're really related to them, right?
Yeah.
Does anybody wanna try to touch on why they think one of them would be deeper than the other? The answer, yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, but then there's the child, and that's a feeling I've never felt before. It's so deep. You've created something that's come out of you, so
Right.
it's deep in a completely different way. It's
Not
a
just
love
it's deep
that
because they
you-
came out of you, by the way, Josh. It's deep because they are from you. They're from your genes.
Yeah.
They're from the genes of the two of you, 100%. There's something huge about that. So they're both very deep relationships. We are going to be arguing that the relationship between a husband and wife is deeper, even though it's not a blood relationship, by the way. Like, for example, just to bring a very technical example, I just learned recently that when it comes to being a match, like a genetical match for someone, like let's say for a kidney donation or something like that, the best matches are usually brothers or siblings. brothers or sisters, not even closer than parents, which is interesting because you came from your parents, right? But here's the thing. You came from two parents. And that means that, which, let's say your mother, you share one part of your DNA with your mother, but you also share a part of your DNA with your father, which they don't share with each other, right? As opposed to your sibling, which the DNA that your sibling has comes from your father and your mother. So he or she has the same DNA, or the same DNA origins as you have. So that's what makes them have a similar connection. So there is something very, very deep about a parent-child relationship, but yet still we are going to argue that a husband and wife relationship is going to be deeper. Why is that? I think in order to understand that, we need to understand where this all comes from. And now, for real, I think we are going to have the video. My apologies. I realized as I was continuing to talk that the video actually comes later. It's going to shed light on before, but it's also going to shed light now. Okay, please turn your.
During the 6 days of creation, God made the heavens and the earth and the trillions of components that populate them, all from absolute nothingness. On the sixth day, it became apparent that something was missing, a companion for man. The Torah describes how God caused a deep slumber to fall upon the man. God removed one of his sides and sealed flesh in its place. God built the side that he had taken from the man and fashioned it into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "At last, a bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh." But why was woman created from the body of Adam? Could God not have created woman from nothingness, just as he created everything else? Or from earth, as he created Adam? Did God finally run out of raw materials?
The reason we're asking this question is because perhaps if we can understand properly what the origin of man and woman are, then we can understand why their relationship is going to be even deeper than the relationship of parents and children, and then that will lead us to a deeper understanding of what kiddushin is when we get to it. And of course, this ties on the Kabbalistic axiom that all that occurs on the physical plane is a reflection of a spiritual reality. This division of Adam, right? There was and the splitting of the atom, if you will, right? Adam as in the first man, and then reuniting him. Right? In other words, creating Eve from Adam and then creating a situation in which they need to find each other and they need to be reunited is a reflection not just of the physical, but of what's also going on a spiritual level, on a soul level. And it's reenacted in every single man and woman since. Jesse, if you can read for us, please, text 6a.
When God sends forth souls into the world, each includes a male and female joined together. When they descend to the world, they are separated from each other. When their time to be married arrives, God, who knows these souls, joins them as they were before descended into this world. Before they descended into this world. When they are joined together, they become one body and soul.
So, according to the Kabbalah, every human being that walks this earth has one half of one soul. In other words, a human being, when he was created as one being. So just to understand, there is a common misconception that the word tzela I think there are commentators maybe who say that, but the more standard translation of the word tzela, which is what God took from Adam in order to create Eve, is that he did not take a rib, he took a side. What does that mean? That apparently when the Adam that we talk about, and we call him he, right? The Torah does not say he. The Torah says they, by the way, with no relationship with the they that today in English they call people they, right? They because it was plural. In other words, it says Zachar and Nekeva bara otam. He created them as male and female together. In other words, Adam and Eve were some sort of androgynous being, and there's different commentary about that, whether they were back to back or front to front or two faces or whatever it is, but it was a male-female being in one. Then he split that being so that they became two separate bodies, and those two separate bodies then find each other through marriage. This physical process is a reflection of the spiritual process. In other words, that a human being is one soul that gets divided upon coming down into this earth and then gets reunited through marriage. I'm sure many of you have heard of this before. It's the origin of some of the statements we'll read here. Text 6b, right, on page 9. Al kain yazov ish et aviv et imo. Therefore, says the Torah in Genesis, man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And what happens then? They shall become one flesh. When they come back together, it's as if they're reuniting the way they were originally. This leads the Talmud to make an amazing assertion. Ishto kigufo have. A person's wife is considered like it's their own body. By the way, this has like halachic ramifications, like whatever. I don't want to get into all the technicalities, but a person's wife's body is not like another human being's body. It's like your own body. And now we can understand the difference, or the qualitative difference, the difference in quality between the relationship between a father and son, let's say, or a husband and wife. A parental-child relationship, as deep as it is, because, like Josh described, they come from them, and genetically they're sourced in them, etc., etc., etc. And there's no choice, and you can't choose. You can never terminate their relationship. As much as there are people today alive in the world that would like to terminate their relationship with their parents, right? And perhaps rightfully so. There are people in very abusive relationships, right? But still, it's impossible. And yet, the relationship between a husband and a wife, because they are one soul, on a spiritual level, is considered deeper. This is what we're trying to say in text 7. Susie, if you can read for us, please. On page 10, text 7 from the Rashba. The Rashba is Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet. For any of you who were in the previous course that we did, the Shut course, I don't think anybody here was. Susie, did you take that one? No.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I don't think so.
The Rabbinic Responsa course. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one we just did. So the Rashba is one of the great rabbinic responsa rabbis. So if you can read for us text 7, his perspective on this idea.
Okay. A bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh, etc. Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, etc. Eve was created from Adam's bone, so that the attachment between husband and wife would be truer and more powerful than the attachment between children and their parents, though they come from their parents' bodies. Yet the attachment between husband and wife is deeper, for Eve was taken literally from Adam's limbs.
Okay. This is now going to help us understand this interesting concept that we introduced at the beginning of today's lesson called Kiddushin. What is Kiddushin? Kiddushin is marriage. It's marriage. Quacks like a duck, looks like a duck. But yet it's not marriage in the fact that they cannot be physically intimate. What's going on here? What is going on by Kiddushin is best reflected in the blessing we make on Kiddushin. This is the blessing we make. We start off with the regular introduction. Blessed are you, God, who sanctified, my Lord our God, King of the universe, right? Who sanctified us with his commandments. So far, that's the standard opening to any blessing. Baruch atah Hashem asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav b'tzivanu. And what do we say? B'tzivanu al ha'arayot. I'm reading, if you'd like to follow me, I'm reading text 8a, which is this blessing. He instructed us to refrain from engaging in illicit relationships. He has forbidden unto us betrothed and permitted us unto those whom we marry through chuppah and the preceding kiddushin. This is the blessing of kiddushin. We make a blessing on the fact that we were prohibited from doing something. This is such a strange concept. Name one other mitzvah that we do that. We make brachot on almost every single mitzvah, but we don't make brachot on things we don't do. Right? When's the last time you walked by a McDonald's and you said, "Thank you, Baruch atah Hashem, who commanded us not to eat Philly cheeseburgers"? We don't do that. We don't do that. We don't make we get really angry at somebody. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who commanded us not to sock somebody else in the face. No, we don't do that. We don't make blessings for doing a negative. It doesn't make sense. We make blessings for when we do something, right? So, Moshe Avigdor Amiel is going to shed some light on this. Jesse, if you can read for us, please. It's text 8b on page 11.
Okay.
Go
Where
ahead.
do we find this recitation of a blessing on a negative, on something that God forbade? Sorry, the page is weird on my screen.
That's okay.
Truth, however, this negative isn't negative at all. I can't see this word here. The word he has forbidden us unto betrothed reveals a paradox. The woman is betrothed, yet she is forbidden to her husband. It must be then that the couple shares a profound soulful and spiritual bond that transcends any physical expression and is not contingent on external benefit. This indeed is a reason to recite a blessing.
And this is a very, very powerful idea. Rabbi Amiel, who by the way was, I think, the first Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel. He was a rabbi even before the founding of the state, and then the first Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel. He's observing something very powerful here. We're not really making a blessing on a negative, but somehow the negative is telling us about the positive. The fact that these two people who somehow are not really they're not married in the sense they can't do certain things yet, right? They can't be physically intimate yet, but yet there's something that is positive about the relationship between them. They've done something. They've created a bond between the two of them that the only way for us to describe it is with a negative. And only Kiddushin represents that. Only Kiddushin tells us that. In other words, if marriage is to be divided into two things, right? The first step is just the institution. It's just the coming together of these two souls. And there's no observable benefits. There's no tax benefits. There's no physical intimacy. You can't touch them. You can't. All the laws of what you would be allowed to do with your wife with your spouse. I'm sorry, I'm talking from my gender. But that you would be allowed to do with your spouse. You're not allowed to do with this person yet. What is created? The foundation of marriage. A union. The spiritual aspect is true already, but it hasn't yet trickled down into the physical. And this is...
What
Yeah,
what
go
is the bracha again? What is the last part of it? What is it?
It was text 8.
What is it?
It's forbidden us unto betrothed and permitted us to those whom we marry through chuppah and kiddushin. So we make a blessing on the negative, which allows for the positive. In other words, we are now secluding ourselves. It's like the first step I'm doing is becoming exclusive. Now, I think a lot of couples do that, right? They enter a period where they're exclusive with each other, and then eventually they get married. But in Judaism, that exclusive period, you're not allowed to be with each other yet. You've become you've become exclusive spiritually, but you haven't actually engaged in any physical intimacy yet. Why is that? That's because this first step is the most powerful step. You're actually making a connection. Where do we see that? We see that in the negative. We see that in the fact that A, they cannot be with anyone else. B, if they want to be with someone else, they have to get divorced. They have to cut off. They have to separate whatever spiritual bond is created here, right? Even though, let's assume somebody goes through Kiddushin, and then they do get divorced, a get and everything. And then they go and they get married to somebody else, and they do Kiddushin, and they do Nisuin, and then they're physically intimate with them. Interestingly, this will be the first person that they're with. And yet, they will have been married before. This is the Jewish view of things. Why? Because Kiddushin creates the first most powerful part of marriage from a Jewish perspective, which is the spiritual connection, the oneness, the becoming one, the union of the soul. And this is why Hashem himself uses this term, Kiddushin or Erusin, which is the other word for it. He uses it to describe the bond between God and the Jewish people. Text 9a is from Hosea, which explains this. I will betroth you to me forever, says God. I will betroth you to me with righteousness, with justice, with loving kindness, with mercy. I will betroth you to me with faith. Why is Hashem speaking of that time when we will finally be reunited with Mashiach and will actually be one? He calls it Erusin. He calls it Kiddushin. Why not call it Nisuin? Why not call it the second step? Text 9b explains. Elena, if you can read for us, please, on page 13, text 9b. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead. The Nisuin, that's the Hebrew word there.
The Nisuin relationship is more valued than Kiddushin, yet Kiddushin holds a distinct advantage. It is the spiritual foundation of divine union, a decreed by God's law, intangible by virtue of its exaltedness. It defies physical expression. This godly law is not susceptible to fluctuation, for it depends not on change-prone human relationship. It stands firm, colored only by the immutability of the law. It cannot even be envisioned otherwise. The spiritual attachment born not of experience but of simple recognition need to be revealed only once in its resplendent intensity, and never again is it subject to vacillation. It is everlasting, and I will betroth you to me forever.
By the way, this was from Rabbi Kook, who I think was the first Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Israel. Anyway, that's interesting. We quoted them both, one after the other. And then after that, we get to the second stage of Nisuin. What happens in the second stage of Nisuin? There's a union of the body, the emotional and physical benefits. They move in together, right? And that is the objective of marriage. And you still need to get divorced in order to separate from that. But it's the second step. It seems that the most important step is Kiddushin. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, is all of this sounding a little bit theoretical, a little bit like philosophical, like, yeah, wonderful, Rabbi, you've created this wonderful ideal of marriage. I want to take, in the 25 minutes that we have left, I want to spend some time making this very, very practical. I'll explain what I mean by that. This theoretical idea that we've introduced, that a marriage is not just a Kiddushin, but also a Nisuin, and that the Kiddushin sets the stage for the Nisuin, that before you're going to have emotional and physical relationship and all that, before you get there, which is the objective, and you're going to live out the rest of your life that way, it's important for you to have Kiddushin. Is even today, when we don't have Kiddushin as a separate, I mean, they're still separate, but they're under the chuppah together, the idea remains the same, that the foundation of a marriage has to be Kiddushin. And as we're soon going to see, and as we're going to see throughout the rest of the 5 weeks of this course, if we can get our minds around the fact, and even if we didn't appreciate this when we got married, we can begin to appreciate it now. If we can wrap our brains around the fact that Kiddushin is an important value to have in a marriage, in other words, this idea of being one, becoming one, before you do anything else, before you engage in a relationship, you're going to become one first, that being the foundation of it, is going to help on a very, very practical level. How? That's the $1 million question. So it's going to help with what we called earlier the loneliness issue. Why did God say he's separating man into two beings, a man and a woman, and they should find each other? Why? Because there's this issue of loneliness, right? This issue of loneliness, from the dawn of time, poets, philosophers, and regular people have bemoaned the existential loneliness that so many people presume to be part and parcel of the human condition. And Kiddushin is supposed to be the antidote to that. So let's talk about this. First, let's see what we mean by loneliness. Peter, if I can ask you to read for us, please, text 10a.
The whole conviction of my life now rests upon the belief that loneliness, far from being a rare and curious phenomena, peculiar to myself and to a few other solitary men, is the central and inevitable fact of human existence. When we examine the moments, acts, and statements of all kinds of people, not only the grief and ecstasy of the greatest poets, but also the huge unhappiness of the average soul, we find, I think, that they are all suffering from the same thing. The final cause of their complaint is loneliness.
Has anybody ever had this experience or observed this experience where you know someone, and maybe you know them very well, and you see them at a party, and they look alive, and they're talking to people, and they're friends, but you know that they're very lonely? Loneliness does not need to mean that you are physically alone. You can be engaged in many relationships and still feel lonely. You can be at parties, and you can be the life of the party, and you can come and you can have wonderful life experiences, and yet still feel lonely inside. That's what these authors are pointing out. Let's keep going. Jesse, if you can read for us text 10b, just another more of the same, if you will.
Ships that pass in the night and speak each other in passing. Only a signal shown and a distant voice in the darkness. So on the ocean of life we pass and we speak one another. Only a look and a voice, then darkness again and a silence.
What Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is trying to tell us is that the maximum we can hope to gain from relationships in general in life is only a look and a voice, and then darkness again and a silence. You can have lots of things from relationships with people. You can have emotional connection with a partner who understands us, who cares about us, empathizes with us, who rejoices at our successes and accomplishments, and cries with us when heaven forbid, misfortune strikes. At this level of relationship, that can be achieved with anybody. You don't need marriage for that. It can be achieved with friends. It can be achieved with siblings. It can be achieved with parental relationships. It can be achieved with rabbis, right? All sorts of wonderful people in your life. As beautiful and as vital as those relationships are, why doesn't it relieve a person from loneliness? Why can a person have all of that and still be lonely? Because ultimately, they are crying over your misfortune. They are being happy over your fortune. Even the best empathy, there's still you and them, and you are caring for them. You don't become them. And I think I see where I think you guys see already where we're going with this. The one exception to that is going to be marriage. And God created marriage as the antidote to that. Why? He's like, I realize that Adam has wonderful relationships with all the beings around him. He has wonderful relationship. Maybe he had a best friend who was a giraffe and a rabbi who was a lion. I don't know, whatever, like he had all sorts of wonderful relationships. But he was missing a relationship with himself. He was missing a relationship that was going to make him feel not lonely because that person will be in it together with him. And that's what marriage was supposed to be. Etzem, a bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. So Hashem said, I'm going to make for him a partner that's going to be of him. And Jesse, if you can, Jesse, you just read, right? Josh doesn't have the thing. Yelena, if you can read for us, please, text 11, which explains this idea. Why is it that a marriage provides the we versus the you feeling my pain? Go ahead.
So long as a person is not married, even when he finds himself in the company of thousands of others, he is still alone, for a gathering of thousands of alone individuals does not solve the loneliness of any one of them. Loneliness is resolved only when one attaches to another on an essential level. When one accomplishes this, even if he is alone in the desert, he is not alone, for within his being is embedded his helpmate, his wife.
So what is the antidote to loneliness? The antidote to loneliness is Kiddushin. What does Kiddushin mean? Kiddushin does not mean the physical intimacy. It doesn't mean the emotional relationship. It doesn't mean the tax benefits. What does Kiddushin mean? Kiddushin means the oneness. The oneness is the antidote to the loneliness. Why? Not because that person is going to, when you come home after a bad day, is going to say, oh, I'm so sorry, honey, that you had such a bad day. No. Because in that bad day, they will feel bad because you had a bad day. There's all the jokes about, spouses sitting at the restaurant, and all of a sudden one of them gets up, and the other one, and somebody asks them, where'd your spouse go? Says, oh, we needed the bathroom, right? These are jokes that are meant to describe this idea that your pain becomes my pain. I could have had the greatest day in the world, but I come home and my spouse had a bad day. First of all, maybe I even know it spiritually that my spouse had a bad day. But even if I'm not on that sort of level, I'm not in tune with it that way, I come home and my spouse had a bad day, that makes my day have been a bad day. For better or for worse, by the way. For anybody who's married and has had this kind of experience, it's a frustrating experience, right? Also, but it's also the most wonderful thing in the world. It means that you can be alone, but not be lonely. You can be standing in a desert all by yourself for 2 weeks, and yet you are not alone because you have found you've become one with someone else. That person is one with you. And that reorientation is a very, very powerful idea. By the way, it's why, what do people complain most about in marriages? People complain most, and what leads the most to divorce is when people complain about feeling lonely in a marriage. They might not have all the words to say this, but what were they looking for? I would argue that all these people that are we said 95% of people, young people, they hope to get married one day. Why do they hope to get married? Why? So they can be physically intimate. They're doing it in college, right? But just so that they can have tax benefits. They can have tax benefits without it. No, what they really want, and whether they can express this or not is another thing. What they really want is to be one with someone else. And if, heaven forbid, someone enters a relationship and they're not feeling one with that other person, first of all, it means it's an unhealthy relationship, and that needs to be worked on. And that's what we're going to talk about actually now for the rest of the lesson. Really for the rest of the course, but for the rest of today's lesson. Then what we need to work on is feeling that oneness. Why? Because feeling loneliness in a relationship is feeling like, why did I get into this? If there's hardship in the relationship, if there's conflict in the relationship, I can navigate that. If the person is not being emotionally supportive enough, maybe I'll call my mother and my mother will be supportive enough, right? Ideally, all those things should also be present in a marriage. But all of those things, that's not why we came into the marriage. What is the underlying cause? What is the most important thing that we look for in a marriage? We don't want to feel lonely. We want to feel one with the other person. We want to feel like we're in this together. The ideas that we're discussing here are very, very far from theoretical. On the contrary, their beauty can actually be transformative. It is specifically because of these ideas that we try to have, we did this right, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, okay. It is specifically because of these ideas that we talk about in the Jewish world. We talk about things called Kiddushin moments. Even though Kiddushin happens at the beginning of marriage, you're thinking, hold on a second. Okay, so I get it. That's the purpose of Kiddushin. Kiddushin is the beginning of the marriage. It's supposed to set a foundation for me to realize that there's something higher than the two of us, which is the oneness of both of us, which we are trying to tap into, and which is why we're in this relationship together. I get that. But what happens in the relationship? What happens 5 years in if I forget it? Or what happens if I didn't experience a Kiddushin introduction to my marriage? Right? This idea of the foundation of the marriage being the oneness. What happens? The answer is that in our marriage, we're supposed to make Kiddushin moments. By the way, in Jewish religious practice, this even boils down to actual practice. As some of you might be familiar, in the Jewish marital laws, there are the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha. What are the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha? That every month, for approximately 12 days following the onset of the woman's menstrual cycle, the husband and wife are forbidden, according to the original letter of the law, just from physical intimacy, hugging, kissing, and actual intercourse. And according to the spirit of the law, even from touching each other and hugging each other and anything like that. Why? What's going on during this period? During this period, we're trying to recreate the Kiddushin. We're not trying to lean into all the stereotypes of every marriage. If you want to kill the physical intimacy, get married, right? All that. No. What we're trying to do is we're trying to say, in the period of the month that we're going to be in our relationship, which is an Nisuin relationship, really. It's a full relationship. We can be physically intimate with each other. We're going to take time off of it. And the Torah gives a whole mandate for exactly how that works. And that ends with mikvah, and then it ends with mikvah night when they have an obligation to be physically intimate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you that are familiar with the details, I don't want to get into all of them now. What is going on during that period? Right? I remember, so in the Hasidic world, when you get married, so first of all, you have somebody who teaches you these laws. But together with those laws, that person, ideally, if they're a good teacher, and I tried to get a good teacher, and they teach them in small groups, 3, 4, 5 people, whatever it is. In my group, there was 4 people. 5 people, 4 besides for me. And I remember my chassan teacher, my teacher who told me, he's like, so what are you supposed to do during that? One of the other boys, we were all grooms already. We were all engaged to be married. One of the other guys asked, so what are you supposed to do during that period? And he didn't mean that as if oh, you get married and you're all over each other and now for 12 days you can't be physically intimate, so what are you supposed to do? He meant it you've been describing that a relationship is supposed to have all this physical touch and you're hugging and you're kissing and all this sort of thing, and it's all part of it. How do you express your love for the other person when you can't even touch them? And the chassan teacher explained to us, and it's such a beautiful Jewish idea, that the exact opposite is true. In order for the physical intimacy not to be cheap, you have to actually spend time showing that it's not just about the physical. It's also about the emotional. It's also about the spiritual. You have a relationship that supersedes the physical. And then when you come back to the physical, it's much more meaningful. So those 12 days, he says, maybe you're so busy being physical, anytime you want to express your love for your spouse, you're physical with them. And I don't mean necessarily just in bed, all sorts of other physical displays of affection, that you don't spend time talking and understanding them and working on the oneness. And those 12 days are an opportunity to do that. Susie, if I can ask you to read for us, please, text 12, which is from a Chabad Shlucha, actually, a mikveh expert, a woman who lectures about mikveh all around the world. I've wanted to bring her down here, and I haven't had success yet. Mrs. Rivka Slanim, text 12, page 16.
The mandatory monthly separation fosters feelings of longing and desire, at the very least, a sense of appreciation, which is followed by the excitement of reunion. Over the course of a lifetime, open-ended sexual availability may well lead to a waning of excitement and even interest. The monthly hiatus teaches couples to treasure the time they have together and gives them something to look forward to when they are apart. Every month they are separated, not always when convenient or easy, but they wait for one another. They count the days until their togetherness, and each time there is a new quality to their reunion. In this regard, the Talmud states, so that she will be as beloved on the day as on the day of her marriage.
So the Jewish system is set up in such a way that once a month you're taking time out to reflect, and then what happens? You get remarried. You go to the mikveh, right? By the way, mikveh symbolizes rebirth. By the way, if there's anybody here that doesn't do this in their marriage and would like to learn more about this, please reach out to me personally. It's not the type of thing that we give classes about publicly, etc. But I'm happy to give proper classes about it. We have a beautiful 5-star mikvah here in Pasadena, even more beautiful than the one in the picture here, if you can imagine. It's like a spa-like experience, and it's a very private experience, and you can go through the whole mikvah properly according to halacha, etc. Anyways, and what happens? The mikvah. One of the symbolisms behind mikvah is that the water symbolizes the amniotic fluid, so you're kind of being rebirthed, etc. And then you come out, and it's like it's a brand new marriage, right? How many marriages can use that? We've been rushing through life, whether you bump into conflict, so then for sure you could use a reset. But even if you don't bump into conflict, you just bump into, let's say, burnt out and just floating along through life. Young or old, this happens to people, right? And then what happens? A certain time of the month comes, time for a reset. Time for you to spend that time to one degree or another away. Now you're going to go to the mikveh, then you're going to come back, and it's a new experience. It's a new moment. It's like a remarriage, a tiny remarriage. Okay. But the truth is that this is not just supposed to be when you go through the mikveh cycle. Ideally, this process, the taking time out to reflect, and then coming back with the excitement of the reunion, can really happen on a day-to-day basis. This kiddushin moment is something we can implement into our lives, even just as a mental exercise. Imagine if every day you took the time to, during a window of your day, and trust me, we all have windows in our day when we're totally separated from our spouses, whether physically or even just emotionally in the house because we're busy or whatever it is. And during that time, you don't just treat it as time for you to be able to scroll on your phone and flip through a couple more YouTube videos. Instead, you spend that time, even just 30 seconds, 60 seconds, to remind yourself, hold on, I'm not in such a wonderful relationship right now with my spouse. Let me just pause. Let me remind myself of what it means to be married. Let me remind myself of kiddushin, which means it's not all about the physical intimacy. It's not even about the emotional relationship. It's about oneness. It's about me and my spouse are one. Imagine coming out of a kiddushin moment like that and then approaching whatever stressful marriage scenario comes your way. We'll do some of them here. Imagine what would be the reaction. Think of a stressful marriage scenario. Let's do some, okay? So on page 17, they're fun. They're really typical examples, so you'll see exactly what I mean. Here, we'll do one for men and one for women. Men, you arrive home, you eat dinner, and are working at the computer on a deadline for a big client, okay? So you came home, you had a whole long day at work. You left early in the morning, you woke up earlier, whatever, it's a massive client set. While your wife is sitting, what's she doing? She's watching Oprah on TV. She calls you to put the toddler to sleep. What's the natural knee-jerk reaction? Excuse me, I need a drink, but I don't have. I had a tea, but I finished it.
Man.
What is the knee-jerk reaction? The knee-jerk reaction is, are you kidding me? I'm working so hard to provide for the family. You're just sitting and watching Oprah. Why don't you put the kid to sleep, right? You could see the marriage fight breaking out already. But I want you to rethink this moment if the husband just had a kiddushin moment right before that. Right before that, he spent 2 minutes away from his spouse. He went outside, closed his eyes, and said, I just want to take myself back to my chuppah. I want to remember what it means to be in a relationship that has nothing to do with the physically intimate and nothing to do with the emotional and nothing to do with the fact that this person is going to help me put the toddler to sleep. Now he comes back inside. Same scenario. She asks him to put... Immediately, he'll be in a more positive frame of mind. She's not out to get me. We together have to put the toddler to sleep. We together have to make money for the family. Because remember, that's the attitude he's coming from an attitude of oneness. Probably she just feels like, I don't know, maybe mentally she's in a place where she really needs to unwind. I'll put the toddler to sleep, no big deal. I'm not saying it's going to flip around in a snap of a finger. I'm describing something now as if it's like some sort of magical recipe, etc. But more kiddushin moments in our lives will automatically put us more in that frame of mind. And we don't take the time to do that. Instead, what we're doing is we're just constantly spinning the wheels. Let's do another one. For the women. Your husband is good at talking the talk and getting the big clients, right? He's got a wonderful business, but bad at holding on to them and handling the details. So he involves you more and more in the business. Then when your kid is sent home for cutting class and smoking dope, your husband screams at you, you're not available to them as a mother. So what would be the normal reaction? The normal reaction would be, are you kidding me? I'm helping you. You asked me to do this. But what's if you're in a kiddushin moment? All of a sudden, here's another way of looking at this. Often, unfortunately, and you see this on TV all the time, but for sure, even in regular relationships, people talk about who won the argument. The real truth is, if a spouse wins an argument in a marriage, they've lost. Why? Because you weren't arguing with somebody else, you were arguing with yourself. You weren't being asked to do a favor for somebody else, you were being asked to do a favor for yourself. When is the last time you bent down to tie your shoe, and then you got up and said, "Are you freaking kidding me? I'm not tying your shoe." Right? Why? Because it's yourself, that's such a strange thing to say. You're not tying your shoe for somebody else, not doing a favor for somebody else. This is you, it's part of you. If we can get more often into that frame of mind with our spouse, then when it comes to navigating conflict, that's the attitude we take. And again, we're going to talk much more about this over the next 5 weeks. We're nearing the end of our class. But I'm just trying to show you how this can be applied on a very, very practical level. And I want to conclude with the following idea. There are many, many techniques out there, and many of them are very, very useful, positive. I encourage you to buy those books, etc. I mean, there's bad books out there too, whatever, right? We could talk about that. But what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is going to be offering a very, very different type of self-help. All of those self-helps are trying to navigate when two people come together. They're two separate people, and how can they navigate that relationship together? In other words, most of the marriage self-help books that exist out there could also be applied to two friends that are navigating conflict, that are having a breakup, they're having a hard time getting along with each other. You can use those same tips for those people. So if we're going to spend now 6 weeks talking about a unique perspective of marriage, about the Torah perspective of marriage, we're going to be discussing it from a Torah perspective. The Torah's perspective is very, very different. The Torah's perspective cannot be applied to two friends. Why? Many of you I know attended the Nurturing Relationships course that I gave a few months or years already. I think it's 2 years ago already. That course. And when I advertised that, I told people, and it indeed was, it was not about marriage. That one was about navigating relationships. This course is about marriage. That course was about navigating any relationship. And yes, of course, it can be applied to a marriage also, because the person you marry, in addition to you being one with them, you're also in an emotional relationship with them, and in a physically intimate relationship with them, and in a financial relationship with them, and in a parental relationship with them, and all the other relationships that you're in with them. You have a lot of roles that you play. But the marriage role is unique. And the Torah's view of the marriage role is unique. The Torah, which is the blueprint, of course, for the way we live our lives, right, views the husband and wife as one entity, and marriage as a holy institution in which that entity exists. And the crucial detail here is, we believe that God is a partner in that marriage. There is a famous Torah thought, so famous that I don't even know who said it. It's like just quoted all the time. It's most often quoted at Sheva Brachot, after a marriage, when they have 7 days of celebration of the marriage. So often somebody will get up and share, I think it's from Rashi, if I remember correctly. Rashi on the Talmud. That in the Talmud, that in the Hebrew word for ish, the Hebrew word for man is ish. And the Hebrew word for woman is isha. And they're spelled exactly alike, except for one letter that's different. Ish is spelled Aleph Yud Shin, and isha is spelled Aleph Shin and a Hey. What are the two letters that they share that are alike? Aleph and Shin. In Hebrew, that is the word Ish. If a man and a woman intend to go into a marriage and to try to get together, there's a lot of passion there. There's a lot of fire. Ish means fire. But what are the two additional letters that we add in? A Yud and a Hey, which represents God. It is specifically with regards to this idea that the Talmud says, Ish v'isha, a man and a woman, Zachu, if they are lucky, if they are meritorious, Shechina Shriya B'neim, then if they act properly each other, then God comes down and harmonizes the relationship. But if not, then they are just like two fires that will consume each other, and that's it. That is what we're talking about here. We're talking about a oneness that is a soul level of oneness. It's a godly level of oneness. That when two people come together into a relationship, they are not just two people coming into a relationship, but they are one body and one soul. That can have a tremendous, tremendous impact on our marriages. It turns it from you and I into we. And with this, we'll conclude our first lesson of the art of marriage. Please turn your attention to the video screens for a summary of today's lesson.
Key points. While many believe that marriage is becoming obsolete, an overwhelming majority of people personally plan on getting married and do get married. There's a deep-seated human need for a committed, mutually exclusive relationship with another. This relationship has numerous emotional and psychological benefits. This symbiotic relationship is known as Nisuin. There exists an even deeper dimension to the marital relationship, one that makes it unique among all relationship. A husband and wife are two halves of one whole. Kiddushin symbolizes the essential unity of the couple, because during the Kiddushin period, the relationship between husband and wife is not contingent upon any benefits. A person's natural loneliness can only be resolved by connecting to another on this essential Kiddushin level. Marriage is the most critical relationship in life. A person who does not appreciate this will never realize the full potential of marriage. The laws of family purity allow a couple to renew the excitement of marriage and experience the Kiddushin Nisuin dynamic on a monthly basis. Furthermore, frequent Kiddushin moments enable us to properly cope with marital challenges.
Thank you all for joining us for lesson 1 of the art of marriage, the case for marriage. And I look forward to seeing you all next week for lesson 2 when we dive into some bedroom secrets. All right. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.